had interactions with a couple of Memphis Police Department senior officers. In terms of, they were briefed by a lieutenant in the intelligence division before they took the positions, and they named all these people. And I knew who these people were anyway. And they were in position. But they didn't kill Martin King. They were a backup unit. I know they didn't know they were a backup unit, but they were. Martin King was killed from the bushes behind Jim's Grill by a Memphis Police Department officer who was a sharpshooter. And he was the man hired to do the job. And it was from him that Lloyd Jowers took the rifle. Now, there was a military task force in the city on that day that included the sniper unit, who didn't know that there were also photographers. Psychological operations team, 2 photographers were on the roof of the fire station, and they photographed everything. They photographed people on the balcony, people in the parking lot, and after the shot, he spanned into the bushes and they got the killer just lowering his rifle. We negotiated for 2 years with the fellow who retained one set of those prints, who lives in Costa Rica, to try to get them. And my colleague used his name, unfortunately his real name, going in to Miami and on an airplane, and was followed by an FBI team out to the interview site, and they stood in a car about 100 meters away, and as he interviewed, he was talking to the psychological operations guy who had the prints. They put a big long lens camera out the door on the passenger side, and the photographer saw it and it spooked him, and he split, thought we were trying to set him up. So we didn't ever get those photographs. But there was that photographic team, there was the sniper unit, there were military intelligence people all over the place, there were Army, they call them ASAs, there were Army security agency people who tapped all the phones in King's in the motel room. They had his room and the rooms on either side of him bugged and tapped, and they had 3 folders, 1 for each room. So that this was a concerted presence. It was a task force presence. And whilst it was not responsible for the actual murder, that was the mob job, and it was done. They were nevertheless there. So all this emerged from the television trial. People started to come forward. I published a book with this information called Orders to Kill in '95. That brought more people forward, more evidence started to come out, and unfortunately we also learned at that point in time that James Earl Ray had liver disease from hepatitis C and was likely to die. So the family then was faced with the decision of what to do in these circumstances, and they decided overwhelmingly now to come forward strongly and seek a trial for James Earl Ray, and that's what they did. And I told them when they decided to do that, they would lose money. As Martin King lost all of his contributions when he decided to oppose the war, they would lose money, they would lose followers, they would be demeaned by the media, they would be attacked by the media. I said, you must interview some witnesses. I want you to talk, I want you to see the evidence yourself, so you're not in a situation where people say you're being manipulated. And they said, you don't need to worry about that, you're like a member of the family. I'm in this curious situation of having been a friend of a victim, and having been the attorney for the man accused of killing the victim, and having been close to the family of the victim throughout, and eventually having become the lawyer for the family itself. I don't know if a lawyer's ever been in quite that kind of situation before, and I couldn't have been in it if I thought I had the slightest bit of conflict, but I didn't, because all of our interests were the same. The families and Ray's were the same, was proving his innocence so he could get a trial. They came forward for a trial, they were attacked, we were close to a trial at one point. Judge Joe Brown, whom you know probably as a television judge now, or some of you may, was the criminal court judge in Memphis, Tennessee, who for a period of almost 4 years presided over the wrangling of our efforts to get this trial. And as he was, I think, on the verge of granting the motion, finally, The state made an application that he should be removed from the case because he had become prejudiced. Went up to the Court of Appeals. They didn't allow a hearing. They simply ruled he was taken off the case. When they took Joe Brown off the case, that effectively stopped the possibility of a trial for us. We lost that. James was going to die and needed a liver transplant. I arranged a liver transplant for him at the University of Pittsburgh Hospital. He met all their criteria and they agreed to accept him. I made an application to the court in Tennessee and was denied. Even though it wasn't going to cost the state anything, they nevertheless decided they didn't want to let James Earl Ray have that liver transplant. That was equivalent to signing his death warrant. So all of the efforts of the family and legally we did were met with these kinds of roadblocks throughout the case, and all of the new evidence that was revealed was just totally ignored. And James Earl Ray died in April of 1998 in prison without ever having his trial. And we met in Atlanta, and the family said, "Where do we go from here? What is this? What can we do about this?" And I suggested a wrongful death civil action against Lloyd Jowers because we had enormous evidence against him. And they were torn because they'd been attacked so much. They said, "Is it really worth it?" And finally, Coretta King made the decision, yes, we're going to do it. She said, "I always think when we have difficult decisions like this, what would Martin do and what would Martin have had me do?" And the children were arguing, "Oh, it's going to be more hassle, or it's going to be so difficult," and they were agonizing over it. She just cut through it, and she said, "Bill, we're going to trial." Boom, that was it. And that shut them up, of course. And of course, then they came enthusiastically on board and supported the mother's decision. So we went to trial. We filed the action in '98. We tried the case in '99. We got a judge who was going to retire after this case, a black judge. So he had a reputation for being reasonably independent, and he was now going off the bench. And James Swearingen. So we started this case on November 10th, 1999, and the trial lasted 30 days. There were over 70 witnesses, and all this evidence was put under oath. It went on and on and on. And the jury took 59 minutes. And they came back and they found for the King family and against Lloyd Jowers, apportioning liability for him 30% and 70% of the liability to agents of the government of the United States, state of Tennessee, city of Memphis. Thank you. 59 minutes it took that jury. And you probably never heard about that trial. Because the media sat in the hallway. Except when Miss King testified, or Dexter, or Andrew Young, they sat in the hallway. One of my friends is general counsel of Court TV, and he said, "This is so important, we're going to cover it live every day." And he was so embarrassed when he was overruled at the senior filtering level. So there was a window of about 12 hours where there was some reporting of what happened, and then it just ended. And anything you heard thereafter was a criticism of the judge. He fell asleep, or the jury was falling asleep, or there were a variety of reasons. But the trial is a historic event. There are 4,000 pages of testimony that's up on the website of the King Center, it's the kingcenter.com website. And those 4,000 pages are there for all history to read. I've summarized them in Act of State.